This episode of Stoked brought to you by FreshBooks.com.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Stoked, the ultimate Star Trek online podcast. My name is Chris.
My name is Jeremy.
Whoa, hey there, J-Man. How you doing?
I'm doing great. You know what? I got a present from one of our viewers. Look, he made me a television shirt.
You got your own little shirt there, Stoked shirt.
It's a shirt with a television show on it that I've heard of.
He sent me mine, too, but I was wearing it throughout the week. I got it dirty. I figured I probably shouldn't wear a dirty shirt on the show, but thanks. That was from...
you jumped the gun.
I know.
You should have been saving it.
That was from Murphy in our chat room.
And Murphy's actually going to join us later for a guest math segment. We're going to do, we mentioned last episode before we took a week off, we'd be dedicating this entire episode to the Foundry that landed on holodeck.
We're delivering.
Yeah, so this week in math, Murphy's going to help me do a quick little introductory tips and tricks.
Another guest hosted math, and he spent a lot of time on Foundry missions. We've actually reviewed one of his before, and he's a big Foundry
Well, he won
enthusiast.
our last contest with Defend Deep Space 11.
So he'll be joining the J-Man, but of course, before that, coming up, we've got an interview with Daniel Stahl, the executive producer of Star Trek Online, and he spends a considerable amount of his time talking about the Foundry. But we also got some duty officer updates, the duty officer system. Duty. Duty. And then he also talked about the ground combat and a few other things. But,
quite a few other things, actually.
Why don't we cover a little bit of news? Some things have happened in the Star Trek Online world in the last week.
Well, probably one of the most important things ever to hit Star Trek Online, really ever,
the biggest thing ever?
Finally on the C-Store, Bajoran militia uniforms.
Oh, the Bajoran militia uniforms. Right. They, I guess if you don't mind looking like a Bajoran.
Well, one of the great things about it is everything that you type while you're wearing it, it comes across as whiny and needy, so it's got that going for it.
I like it because I feel like it represents a charity case, and so I'm wearing this, and it's like wearing a badge of honor. Look, I'm wearing clothing that was supported, that the Federation supported the Bajorans to make. It's like donations.
Total handouts, yeah.
It's like you're donating money to the needy Bajorans.
Supporting your Starfleet pride by wearing your handouts. That's nice.
No, we kid.
And they smell terrible.
Actually... I'm not wowed by them, but the one I do like is the textured one.
Yeah.
And the extra little note that I like is when you get in close, the way the lighting actually hits the texture, it actually looks kind of slick.
It actually looks like a form of fabric.
Yeah. So
that's cool.
That's neat.
I won't use them, but a lot of people have been really excited about the pins actually have militia ranks on it, so you can be like major and have the correct Bajoran insignia.
You could be like Major Kira, and you could be a Bajoran militia officer who's working for the Federation.
Oh, I do want to mention real quick, though, too, I was also a little disappointed that this pack didn't include the bodysuit version of it.
Yeah.
That she had in the earlier seasons.
I like that one.
Yeah.
All right, so moving on, some other news that came out this week from Cryptic was the return of Zinkovich, Craig Zinkovich, the former EP of STO, left for a while, and now he's back as Cryptic Studios' Chief Operations Officer.
Well, you know what? Stahl covers it more thoroughly in our interview, so we'll just leave it to him.
Yeah.
We'll just mention it.
A few things that didn't really come out in the interview that we thought we'd expand on that surfaced in the most recent Ask Cryptic got our attention. J-Man, you want to start with the first one?
Yeah, right off the bat, one of the things that caught my eye is they've given us some details about how some of the new ground combat mechanics are going to work. We've actually mentioned it on the show that they've been using the term Mass Effect-y for some of this, but there's going to be no cover system. Finally, we do have confirmation. Yes, there's no cover system, but they've been talking about ways that they're going to be tweaking the ground combat AI to incorporate. Basically, what it's going to come down to is that when you break line of sight by walking behind a crate or something, there will be a more obvious shift in aggressive behavior from NPCs. Yeah.
The idea is that while maybe you can't hit a button and crouch behind a freight or a crate, you could theoretically run behind a wall, and that would the system that's supposed to be in place now, where that breaks when you go out of line of sight, that breaks that target lock. That's supposed to be better implemented, a little smarter now. Whereas you could kind of essentially consider that.
But we've all seen when you hop behind cover, the guys just run around the cover and start punching you in the face. Yeah. So hopefully that will be a major improvement that'll make it feel like a cover system, right? Even though it's not actually.
Now, something else that came out in this Ask Cryptic that kind of dovetails with this is there was a mention that we might start seeing some of these ground combat changes hit the test server in May. So that's not too far away. It's
about a month from now.
Yeah, and then you figure you get some time on that, and it probably won't be completely what we're going to see for Season 4, but it could be interesting to start kicking the tires on that.
Speaking of Season 4, we have actually confirmation in this Ask Cryptic that was a little disappointing, but I think we already knew it was going to happen, is we won't be seeing any more featured episodes prior to Season 4.
We did know.
But one of the things that they are saying, though, is that once they start ramping up those featured episodes, they should be practically nonstop. They're trying to ramp up their staffing and their content team and their head count and everything to get to the point that we will never. The goal is to never have more than 1 week between featured episodes.
Sounds awfully ambitious. God, I'd love to see that. That would be so great for this game. I mean, it's such a unique aspect of this MMO. I would love to see it. So I am hopeful. And maybe the hope is some of the things they're fixing in Season 4 will make the future production of these weekly series a little more less time-consuming. Yeah. You never know. So that could be
Although, on the other hand, it could also mean that the future featured episodes won't quite be as fully fleshed. They say they're aiming to keep the quality bar high, but if they're having to pump them out faster, there's a chance that there'll be one or two stinkers in there, you know?
Well, it's inferred. He goes into more detail in our interview, but I think we definitely are seeing a requirement for additional staffing at Cryptic, and hopefully that happens.
On the subject of featured episodes as well, you know, the last series that took place in Romulan space, we mentioned it on a previous show that we were kind of upset there were no dailies. We were wondering if there were going to be any. Well, somebody actually asked that question in the Ask Cryptic, and it was confirmed we're not going to see any dailies coming in the Romulan section, but it is the goal to have dailies or repeatable missions or PvP maps incorporated into every future featured episode series.
Now, I actually was suspecting we might see a PvP integration with this last weekly that we got.
Well, some people have been asking for a shuttle-specific PvP map taking place inside the vault, which would be so much fun.
Right, that's kind of what I was expecting. It didn't happen. It didn't pan out, but if we could get those vault assets into the Foundry, then maybe we could just make it ourselves.
Yeah, maybe.
That'd be cool. Kind of along the theme of things to look forward to, we just got a last couple of things here before we move on, and that's this week's Tweet Leaks.
There's actually not much here. No. It's more ground combat stuff, but it's tough to see when it's not in motion. The first tweet leak we have here is a picture of some of the new movement animations that are coming.
Which, in a still picture...
Yeah, it's hard to see.
Yeah, but it looks like the dude's kind of making a nice, smooth step as he fires.
Yeah,
like that.
And the second one that we have is actually, well, the picture is almost the exact same, but the comments are what's more interesting, is that they're revamping a lot of the sound effects to go along with this. But again, it's a picture, so what the heck do we know?
I don't have a lot of complaints with weapon sound effects. In fact, I really like some of the
I don't think so either. There was another comment in the Ask Cryptic that mentioned that some of the fine-tuning of those sound effects is so that your weapons feel more responsive.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, especially when your game client gets kind of busy. There's sometimes a delay between the animation and the sound.
Right.
All right, J-Man. Now, before we jump into the interview with Daniel Stahl, I am exuberantly excited to talk about our new sponsor on Stoked, FreshBooks.com.
Tell me all about it, Chris.
Well, J-Man, if you are a small business, maybe an independent contractor or a freelancer, you have your passion, and that's your little business that you work on. In my case, we do these shows. We invoice like sponsors, for example, or I also have an IT contracting work that I do on the side to pay the daily bills. Here's the thing. I got in IT to work on computers. I got into podcasting to do shows.
Yeah.
I did not get into these different hobbies, which became career paths, so that way I could manage books. And I suck at it. I suck at it so bad. I avoid it so much.
And you can't make money if you don't charge.
Right. So that's where FreshBooks.com comes in. It's easy online billing, and it is super slick. And the nice thing about it is they've really spent some time designing their invoices. So their templates look smooth, they're professional, they make you look good, and you just easily customize them with just a few easy steps to put your own logo on there. Then you go on there and you put in all your information. FreshBooks automatically stores it for future invoice purposes, does things like expense tracking, and then you can send an electronic invoice to your client, and they can choose to pay electronically or they can pay traditionally.
One of the really cool things is if they do pay electronically, it auto tracks the payment and it auto marks the invoice as paid.
Yes, and if you've got one of those old school clients where they don't want something electronically, there's an option there to also send them a snail mail version.
And you know what? All of these great features, you can try out almost all of them for free.
Yeah.
They have a free account that you can sign up, that plenty to get you started to see whether or not you're interested.
And there's a little extra Benny here because they are a new sponsor, and we're really excited. We would love to have you guys support our sponsors that help us create these shows and make more Stoked. And a sponsor in Stoked is a great thing to get more money into this show and to sort of grease the wheels for you folks out there. They're doing something kind of unique. When you sign up for your free FreshBooks account, when you're making that account, there's a spot in there where you can say, how did you hear about us? If you put in the phrase Stoked, you get signed up for a free birthday cake.
Not just a free birthday cake, but like that cake is going only to the people that type in Stoked.
Yeah.
And that means it's only you guys.
And they're
one of you is going to win a cake.
Get this. Actually, the odds are pretty good, too, because they're giving away one for every week in April. So that's a pretty good chance you can win a free birthday cake. I like that. So thanks to FreshBooks.com for sponsoring Stoked. We are so thrilled to have our first sponsor to actually make a little bit of money to talk about Star Trek Online.
If you win a cake, send us a picture of you with the cake.
We will put that in the show for sure. Yeah. That would be exciting. All right, J-Man. Well, that's all we got with that. Let's go talk to Daniel Stahl. welcome. We've got another interview for you, and this time we have on the line the executive producer of Star Trek Online,
David Stahl.
No, I think it's Derek. Dude.
No.
Derek.
Okay,
It's
sure,
Derek.
whatever.
Hey, Dan, welcome back to the show. How you doing?
Good, as long as it's not Doofus Stahl. I think I'm
You know, it's funny.
We're not there yet.
Yeah, we just haven't worked our way there probably. Hey, now we're going to just do some rapid fire questions at you, and the first ones on the top of our list come right out of the J-Man's brain himself, all about the Foundry. So,
Well, we're kind of dedicating this whole episode to the new launch of the Foundry. So I'm curious if you have any metrics, rough figures already about how many missions have been created in the Foundry by users, and maybe even how much time has been spent actually creating those missions.
obsessing over their levels. Yeah.
Well, before I give that, I have one quick question for you.
All right.
Are you ready to get mathed?
That's pretty good. Okay. Yeah,
okay,
we are.
So I do have some good numbers, and the Foundry it's really exciting to have the Foundry on holodeck because when it's on the test server, we have a very dedicated people using it, but it's not a real good accurate estimate of how many people are going to use it because a lot of people just don't want to take the time to have to go create something that they might not be able to use. So
I didn't even try on Tribble because I didn't want to have to reinvest the same time over.
I gave it a poke.
Yeah.
But even still, so having it on holodeck has been really fun because now we can see sort of the promise of what the Foundry is.
Yeah.
So not only did I give a presentation in our company all hands meeting where I actually ran through a Foundry mission during the company meeting and had them watch me play a mission. Well, actually, I took screenshots and they watched the screenshots, but it was really fun because I used the rating
It was
system.
like slideshows of your vacation.
Yeah.
Yes, it was slideshows of my UGC vacation. So here's some numbers for you. So these numbers are still, they're going up astronomically on a day-to-day basis. So this is, as of a couple days ago, 10,000 plus missions created or projects started in the Foundry.
Whoa.
Out of those, 840 have been published.
Huh.
So 840. So a lot of people are dinking around and learning the tools and creating a project, trying to get used to it. So you're going to see a lot of missions start to be published over the next few weeks because a lot of them have been started.
Yeah.
So out of the 840 missions that have been published, over 250 of them have been reviewed and should be available either for Klingons or Feds in the game. The other really fun stat that I like is to date, 23,000 UGC missions have been completed by players.
Completed. Wow.
Plays. They actually played all the way through the mission. So that just shows you within the first week how much content can be added to the game and that is playable and fun, right? So
And you got to figure that's with the tool kind of in its infancy and the adoption among the player base.
It's still a beta.
Yeah, and it's still early. It's still early adoption among the player base. So that is fantastically awesome.
I'm going to give a shout out to a couple names here. The current highest rated author is Darth Revo.
Oh, I've heard of him.
He has 2 missions at a 0.88 rating. The next up is Joel 306. He's got 2 missions at a 0.87 rating. And the third place is Snapshot _9. He has 3 missions at a rating of 0.87. So those are 3 guys that I just want to give props to.
Wow.
They've already dived in, and people are loving their missions so far.
And they have a few missions under their belt too.
Yeah,
so they're
two and
cranking them
three,
out.
yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Now, speaking of those missions, you guys did. You did some featured episodes, and you've given some props to authors. But are there any plans to sort of work in any kind of reward system, maybe even just accolades for Foundry authors and things like that?
Specifically, actually, I've gotten many requests to see if there's any chance of if an author gets spotlighted by you guys, like has their mission promoted, if there's any way that they could get a reward, actually increasing the number of missions that they can create.
Oh yeah, that'd be great.
Okay, so there's a couple questions there. So I'll answer the first one, which is, in terms of rewards, are we going to set up rewards for Foundry missions? So our plan around that is we intend to introduce what we call a wrapper mission, which is basically a mission that will say, you'll take from one of our contacts in game that says, hey, why don't you go do a Foundry mission? Or why don't you go do this specific Foundry mission? Or why don't you go do 3 Foundry missions? And by doing those missions, you'll then get a reward that we set up. And so that way we can either promote individual Foundry missions that we think are doing well, or you can just, as sort of like a UGC daily, be able to go in and do missions that have good rewards to them, because what that does is it sort of prevents some of the abuse you see in some of the other UGC tools that are out there.
Right.
in that, we don't want, the reason why we didn't hook up awesome rewards to missions is because it's just easy to abuse.
Yeah.
Is it possible that those daily wrappers, if that's the route that you go, could even include rewards like emblems for high-end players?
Yeah, so that's one of the things I'm looking at is finding a way to add variety and spice of life to top-end players that they can go do these UGC missions and be able to earn some of their currencies that they use for items and stuff. One of the things we have been looking at is using project slots as a reward, and that's something that we're investigating right now to figure out if we can do it. If we can, I look at that as a great reward. So, for example, if you have some really popular missions, we could basically reward those authors with more project slots. So that's in the works. I expect in the next month you'll see the first one of these missions hit the holodeck. So sometime in April we're going to get a mission out there that allows you to sort of go do some UGC missions.
One of these wrappers that you're talking about.
That kind of leads me to my next question. Now I'm curious, is that sort of some plans? Because I know there's been on and off discussion about not a lot of new gameplay content between now and Season 4. What this sounds like maybe a little something. Is there some areas in there you can expand on?
Yeah, there's two. So two of the things. So the team, first of all, the team's extremely busy right now with Season 4. Season 4 is pretty big from just a feature standpoint because we have all the ground weapon changes coming. We have the duty officer system, which is a huge new system.
You said duty.
Duty. So that system alone is going to add over 1,000 missions to the game. I don't know if you realize that or not, but it's going to add 1,000 new missions to the game. The cool thing about the duty officer system is that it's going to be very location based. So depending on where you are in the game, missions assignments are going to pop up that you can go send your officers on, and think of them as sort of timed missions. So for example, you'll go into a sector and it'll say, hey, there's a colony here that is having a medical crisis. Well, if you happen to have 3 medical officers, you can put them in a shuttle, go send them on that mission, and they'll be back in 4 hours, and you'll get a reward. And there's sort of a risk to reward ratio. So we plan to have tons of those. So that's part of Season 4. So we're very busy right now making tons of content for Season 4. In the meantime, so back to your question, what are we going to do in the meantime? So we have 2 things planned. One is really focusing on the Foundry and focusing on these wrapper missions that really highlight Foundry content. That's sort of our April plan. In May, Gozer's got something special for you guys because Gozer's been working on a couple of episodes that he's remastered, and I don't even think of these as remasters. I think of these as redone. I look at the Doomsday mission in particular is one of the ones that he's working on, and what he's doing with that mission just makes me grin ear to ear, and I think it's going to be a whole new experience. It's on par with some of the featured episode stuff that we've done in terms of what he's sort of cranking out.
Wow.
So in May, you're going to see a release where we're going to put out some sort of remastered episodes, kind of like what we did with the Azura, but you're going to see the fruits of what he's been working on in May. So those are 2 big things that we have coming out before the June release of Season 4.
Now, that kind of leads me to my next question. I assume once Season 4 lands and you guys catch your breath, probably the conversation will go back to the featured episodes and going back to those. Now, is there any more you can share on you made a mention in one of your last engineering reports about going up to as many as possibly 10 featured episodes a year. Now, I imagine, is that something you plan to just start ramping up into right away, or is that still in discussion? Where is that at?
Also, along the same lines, it was mentioned that you might be looking to staff up. Are there any...
Yeah, so let me explain sort of where I was going with all of that. So featured episodes, obviously a hit. We really like featured episodes. We like making them. We think that when we look at the number of people that log in to play them, it's definitely healthy for the game to continue releasing these. And it always is a fun thing to look forward to every week. So we have been, when we first started the featured episodes, I was very cautious about saying, hey, we're trying this out. We're trying to see if this works. We actually didn't have our full staff working on them. We only had one part of our team working on the featured episodes. So now that we've sort of proven their success and proven that players like them, what I mean by the staffing thing is we want to do as many featured episodes as possible while doing the other work that we have planned. So it's really a sort of a reorganization and a restaffing of how to get everybody focused on featured episodes, so that instead of just having a small portion of the team working on them, we have a majority of our team working on them. And so in some cases that means hiring a new content person or a new systems designer. In other ways it means reorganizing people that were previously working on maybe some other elements of the game that are now working directly on featured episodes.
Can I ask you a follow-up question?
Yeah.
I know a lot of people equate a software development size team to the amount of content that can be produced, and that's not always necessarily true. Personally, in your opinion, would you like to grow the size of the STO team, or are you comfortable where it's at right now?
I would absolutely love to grow the size of our content team. It's kind of one of those things where I think the thing that really brings it home to me is there are more people working at my local Starbucks than are working on my team. And so that's kind of where we would love to have more people. It really just boils down to budgets and timing. So we're looking into options, and obviously going into a new fiscal year, since that's what the bean counters care about, we're re-engineering and re-looking at things. And I can happily say that Mr. Zinkovic is back on staff with Cryptic Studios, and that is his... No kidding. So he started this week. I don't know if you've seen the press release. Maybe a press release hasn't gone out yet.
But slipped by me if it has.
Yeah, I don't think it's gone out yet.
So Craig Z is back in the house. He is now our Chief Operational Officer.
Huh. Oh.
And so he's working directly with Jack. So Jack's now CEO. Craig's now back. And one of his primary functions as Chief Operational Officer is helping us with staffing on all the projects. So him being back takes sort of a burden off of Jack and myself, because he can now finagle with those people with all the dollars and say, hey, this is what makes sense. This is what works. So I've been having a lot of meetings with him this last couple of weeks, just trying to get things working. And it's just been fun to have him back in the house because he understands and loves Star Trek.
Well, Dan, if you get stuck, you just whoever you need, we'll talk to. So you just have to call us. Now, the J-Man brought up a question here that I had completely forgot about, and that was the Enterprise contest.
Yeah, the Enterprise contest is apparently over at this point, but we haven't seen any announcements as to the winners. Do you have any updates available for us?
Oh, my goodness. I wish I did. The Enterprise contest, it's been so much fun. I've got pictures posted all over our office area. I've only Twittered a couple of the pictures, but they're just everywhere. And the thing that we're struggling on is there's no consensus on who should win. It is very contentious right now. Basically everyone has their favorite ship, and we're trying to build basically like, okay, which one is the clear obvious winner? There is no clear obvious winner because there's a lot of different cool designs. So basically we're enlisting, we're trying to hone it down into key stakeholders, which is basically CBS and our leads and our art lead, and we're trying to basically narrow it down. So we hope to be able to announce something in the next week in terms of...
The big holdup there, though, is that CBS is watching the canon, right? I mean, it's been assumed that the winner of this contest is going to be an official part of Star Trek canon from now until eternity, correct?
That is the intention, and obviously what they consider canon, what CBS considers canon is canon is a tricky question because it's kind of one of those things where CBS can say it's canon till the cows come home, but it's really the fans that determine what's canon or not. So it's really, if fans accept something as canon, they'll accept it. So a lot of the discussion is well, what will fans accept as the Enterprise? And so one of the things that we've had to do, and this is kind of one of the tough things, is we've really had to take a look at the contest rules, and there's certainly some awesome ship designs that I cannot wait to get into the game that just aren't an Enterprise because they either don't have the right number of nacelles or they have a different kind of configuration than what the public would accept as an Enterprise class.
Fair enough.
So that's kind of where it's at right now. A lot of good stuff. I hope to have winners announced, those 25 top prize winners and the top 4 announced in the next week, and we'll get that out and done. We're back and forth in email all day long on that now.
That's what you got. That's what you got, and that's okay. Now, last couple of rapid fire questions. J-Man, why don't you fire KDF?
Well, on the subject of ships, I'm going to skip to this one first.
Okay.
We know the Oberth's coming soon. Can you tell us what the special ability is going to be on that ship? Do you know yet?
Well, I know what I proposed.
Does it blow up in one shot?
That'd be fun.
So what the Oberth power actually is going to be, and again, this is still up for iteration, and Al's working on it right now. But what he's working on is a console that comes with the Oberth. So again, think when it's a console, it's something that you can take out and put in another ship. Yep. So this is something like a little bit like the red matter capacitor in that this will be a click toggleable power that will recharge your auxiliary and your shields.
Oh, nice.
Okay, that could be handy.
Yeah, it could be.
I like that.
And very sciencey.
Yeah, very sciencey. Exactly. Yeah. I have a personal question to ask you, and then we have a duty officer update we wanted to get out of you. But the personal question is, in Season 4, you guys ever thought about adding, and I know it's very antisocial, but an invisibility mode? Because I tell you, Dan, sometimes
being able to be online and anonymous.
Sometimes I log in and I have like 15 minutes of PMs before I play the game. And I think sometimes if I could sign in anonymously, even for a little while, that would be very nice.
Well, you know what? There's a reason why all those things exist in instant messengers. So we'll definitely, I'll take a note to sort of talk to the guys about that, because I can understand with how popular you guys are.
Hey, what are you going to do?
What are you going to do?
Somebody's got to bear it. Somebody has to bear it.
I always feel bad because I do log into the holodeck every once in a while when I'm testing stuff, and it's I understand the feeling. It's basically you get a lot of questions, and I wish I could answer everybody's questions.
Yeah.
Sometimes I'm actually doing work, and it's hard to explain that I'm working. But
now I know.
Actually, let's go back to this KDF question that I skipped earlier. I want to know if you've got any spoilers that you can share with us. There are plans to adapt mini missions. We've heard Saturday's Child and Kuvok Mach both mentioned,
right?
Adapting those to the KDF side of content.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering if you can tell us any, just from kind of a high level story, how would those play out for a member of the KDF?
So I'll answer that question, and then there's some other stuff I want to talk about on the KDF. So the way that we look at those is Charles is currently going through the game and looking at missions, especially in hubs where the Klingons currently don't have access. So we're going to be opening up access to all the sectors. Yeah, so we're looking at things like in sectors, in the Cardassian sector and some of the upper Romulan sectors, like what missions are there that already have a Klingon component to them or have a Klingon version of the storyline so that we could retell them from their perspective. Or we could basically have a prequel or a sequel to the episode that makes sense for them, where we could use the same environment but actually give them a mission that makes sense. Because what we don't want to do is we don't want to just take the mission and just swap out Klingons for Feds and then keep the mission objective the same. We want the mission objective to be different.
Well, and specifically in the Kuvok Mach, would it then be KDF assisting in the kidnap of what's her name, Paris?
Oh yeah,
Raul Paris.
Yeah.
So that's one of the things that we're looking at. So again, like you look at an episode like Saturday's Child, where they would go to the planet, and this is where they're actually arriving first, and they're trying to convince the natives that they should join them, and that sort of thing. And then the Federation show up and try and ruin everything, right? So it's just kind of like that sort of fun is what we're looking at. Now that's just one part of what we're planning to do. So again, we have this big goal that we want to get KDF PvE to where it needs to be, and there's a few things that we're really trying to tackle with Season 4 to get new characters, the ability to start as a Klingon right out of the gate. So we're redoing a new tutorial that allows the Klingons to basically learn how to play the game, but then also just taking those first parts of the game and making them much more fun for Klingons. So for example, making a Klingon Academy where it's a new location on Kronos where you actually sort of go through a boot camp and learn all about being a Klingon. We're taking Kronos and we've completely redone Kronos. I mean, it's no longer indoors, it's now outdoors. If you look at sort of those matte paintings of Kronos, there's sort of like these big courtyards in front of the big buildings. We're remaking all of those courtyards into playable areas so that you can actually run around. There's neighborhoods and slums, and you can go to sort of like the Orion slum area. There's bars, just sort of making
dirty Orions,
making it sort of like a social area where Klingons actually want to hang out and want to have sort of their fun. So that's just one part of it. But then what we're looking at doing is taking all the episodes that we've made for Klingons to date and all the featured episodes we've made to date and actually making them part of Klingon progression and leveling them to specific levels. So for example, taking a series like the Davidian series and working the Davidian series into their progression so that, at level 12, they're like, hey, there's something going on at Drazana Station. We need you to go check it out. So that new players coming in when they create Klingons have a much clearer path and much more fun stuff to do.
That makes sense.
We're also tearing out a lot of the stupid patrol missions that nobody likes. Not that, I can say that because I made half of them. But it's kind of one of those things where there's definitely better ones than others, and so we're cleaning up that kind of stuff. So in general, in addition to making more ships and just having more costume options for Klingons, we think that anyone who has been sort of holding off on creating a Klingon because they didn't want to play PvP, we think in Season 4 it's going to be, that's the time when you want to create a Klingon, and we're going to have a path for you to get to higher levels.
All right,
that all sounds really
great. I like
great.
the idea of channeling people to the weeklies, because that is good content, and why not have the Klingon players work that into their storyline? It's good to be there. Anything else?
Yeah, I just, before we let you go, I'd like to wrap this up with anything that you can share with us about the duty officer system.
Yeah, we got little details earlier.
I get the idea that it's getting to the point where some of the details are starting to get set in stone, and I'd love to hear anything that you can share with us about what we can expect.
Sure, and so there's two big parts of the duty officer system that we're working on. One is that you have duty officers, and I know I keep saying duty, but duty officers are
duty.
Duty. So let's just say these officers, right? So these officers are meant to represent the crew that you have operating the ship, not necessarily your bridge officers that are sitting on your bridge, but these are the guys that are down in your ship doing their duties, right? And so that part of the game is you're going to have the ability to find and collect these officers, much like so think of them as trading cards, right? Like, so you're going to go and you're going to find an Ensign Joe, right? And an Ensign Joe basically gives you +1 in astrometrics, and maybe he makes your warp drive, efficiency +10, something like that. So you sort of find and collect these bridge officers, and then you're going to have a org chart that sort of represents them affecting your ship. So we call that the active roster. So these are people that are actively improving your ship. So you can take these cards that you find and you can put them, these officers that you find, you can put them in your active roster, and they will have a direct beneficial impact on your ship performance.
Has it been determined yet if there's any growth in the org chart? Like, do you start at an ensign or a lieutenant level with a smaller org chart, or does it grow with your ship, or how is that determined?
It grows with your rank. It's not tied to any given ship. It's tied to your rank. So as an ensign, you might have 10 slots that you can sort of be in charge of, whereas an admiral may go up to 20 or more slots that you have to work with. I don't know the specific numbers yet. That's still being determined, but it does grow with rank. And it's not per ship. It's just per captain. So it's like your captain this is his staff, right? Like, here's the staff. And as he sort of moves from ship to ship, he brings the staff with him.
So does that also mean that we don't have to reassign them every time we change ships?
Correct. You don't have to reassign them. They're just one specific roster. Yeah. So they're not. So that's one part of it. One part of it is finding synergies between different officers, because it may be that if you get 3 of these guys, they have a stack effect. Or maybe if you have 5 of these guys, maybe that opens up some new power that you didn't have before. So it's kind of like, think of it as ways for us to unlock special abilities and special things that your ship can do based on what you have in your active roster. So that's a fun part of the gameplay.
Almost like equipment sets in a way, then.
Almost like equipment sets, but it's really it's slightly different in that these are officers that have multiple abilities that you want to sort of. And think of them as rarities too, right? So you might have the rare Ensign Joe may come with +3, whereas the basic Ensign Joe only comes with +1. So there's definitely a collectability and sort of a, hey, you've got that guy that I really want. I want him on my ship, kind of like that sort of Picard, Riker trading back and forth between, like, well, you take Ensign Rowe, she's a pain in the ass.
And Bajoran to boot.
and Bajoran. But so that's one part of the game, right? The other part of this, and I kind of keep saying game because it's kind of like a mini game. The other part of it is we are introducing assignments, and assignments are a really fun way for you to earn mission credits and rewards by using your officers on away assignments.
So while they're gone, their buffs that they might provide you would be unavailable?
Well, you wouldn't be able to use them in your active roster. So when they're not in your active roster,
I like that.
So the guys that aren't doing anything, they're just kind of sitting around, you can send them, you need to keep them busy. Yeah. So you need to keep them doing stuff. And for example, like maybe this is how you unlock Cations. Like, maybe a Cation bridge officer, you basically send a diplomatic mission to their planet and say, hey, we want to recruit a Cation bridge officer. Right. So you send this out, and it takes a certain amount of diplomacy skill to do this. And then the end result is you get a Cation bridge officer.
So many variables to consider in this too. That's wow.
It's exciting because it could be. I do really like the player card aspect of it. I'd love to have a good way to actually even trade them.
So it sort of encourages exploration too, because it'd be like, hey, if you go over to this area, there's this really cool assignment mission that you can send these guys on.
Yeah, I think that'll be a lot of fun. Well, Dan, I know you got to get going soon. Is there anything else you want to touch on before we hang up on you?
Oh, just that I love you guys.
Aww. Well, feelings mutual, of course.
I have to say, Stoked, it's one of the things that the team just really enjoys watching every week. It's a little bit of it's self-serving, but partly because you guys do a great job.
Making the shows kind of self-serving.
Yeah.
We kind of appreciate the work you do. And you guys always have great questions, and I really enjoy the time that you spend to sort of not necessarily treat us with kindness all the time, but also to really ask the tough questions. That's something that helps us, because when you bring things to our attention, it really does make a difference. And so that we thank you for that, and I thank you for your time.
Well, awesome. Thank you, and keep up the great work. We're looking forward to season 4, of course, and also, I mean, the Foundry is just the Foundry and the featured episodes have been huge and are going to keep being huge. So, congrats on all that stuff. And I know I'm going to be in there tonight playing some Foundry missions. So, thanks for coming on the show, Dan.
Thank you, guys. Have fun.
We'll talk to you later.
Joining us for our 4th consecutive guest mass appearance. Today we have Admiral Murphy. Thank you for joining me, sitting to my that side. And we're going to be giving you some high-level tips and tricks to get you started in the Foundry. Basically because it can be a little overwhelming when you first step into this. Some people don't know where to begin. So let's get started. The very first thing that I can probably recommend to everybody is write your script before you get into the Foundry. Now that might sound like a weird tip to include as a getting started in the Foundry, but Murphy, tell us some of your personal experience with why this is a good thing to start with.
The number one problem right now of trying to write your script in the beginning of starting off in the Foundry is that there is no spell check. If you write out your Foundry mission beginning in a Word document or something, you won't have as many spelling checks as if you were copying it over into the Foundry. So it's better to start off there. Plus, it's easier to work with because you don't have all these multiple tabs as you're writing your mission.
Plus, we'll get into the story tab itself a little more thoroughly in just a little bit, but it's not easy to conceptualize a story at that point when you have so many different boxes to fill in with stuff.
And really, you can get a lot of boxes.
So again, write your script before you even enter the Foundry. Once you're inside, Murphy and I have already discussed this a little bit. We agree that one of the first steps you should build is your maps, your environments.
Yeah.
Not only because it's a bit time-consuming to work this out, but I actually feel like it has a really profound impact on the stories that I've already written once I see trying to plug them into an actual physical world.
Yeah, if you have everything set up already, you'll know, okay, I need to interact with this console eventually. So when you go to set up your story, you already will have that console in place.
Now, one of the tips that you told me is that very frequently within the Foundry, it becomes necessary to duplicate your map. But when you use the duplicate function in the Foundry, it'll take everything. That includes groups of NPCs or special triggers, all those kind of things. Those will all get duplicated as well. So
don't add any NPCs to your maps unless you know they're going to be duplicated, because after you duplicate the map, you can add it in.
Especially like, let's use an example, a real-world example. Let's say you start your mission on a station or something like that. Then you go off to space to fight off some invaders. Well, if they've damaged the station and you want to go back down to the same place, you're going to want your NPCs to either have moved and be working on something, or be injured and laying on the ground or something like that. Mm-hmm. And it'll be easier to start from a blank slate rather than having to delete half of the stuff before you re-add it in a new state. Now, another recommendation, or actually more of just something that you need to know when you're going into building your environments, is that the scale of moving things can take some getting used to. I can already tell you, though, that they've recently changed the scale of moving things in space specifically, so that it looks like one unit is now 1 kilometer of sensor range. So that's handy.
Yeah, it does look like that now. At first, you're not going to know exactly what coordinates you're going to want to use.
Don't be afraid of using plenty of trial and error. That's the best way that you can get used to moving objects in the Foundry.
Yeah.
Now, something that's not guess and check, once you have your environments built, you've recommended that the very next thing you build is actually any specific unique-looking costumes. That includes ship costumes as well.
It's kind of limiting right now.
Limiting because right now you can't change more features. You can't change height or the arm length or cheek size or anything like that.
No sliders. It's just the features.
So think of it more like you're wrapping a skin on a preset model.
One that's really, really short.
But the reason that you want to build out those costumes first is because during the next step of everything is actually plugging your story that you've written into the story tab of the Foundry. And one of the options you have with each one of those dialogues that pops up is assigning who is saying each line of everything. And if you haven't built your costumes yet, you won't be able to select them. You'll have to go back through them later on and select them. Okay, so I started mentioning the story tab. Why don't we go ahead and get started with some actual definitions so that people can understand what they're looking at the first time that they open this. What is this grant mission dialogue that pops up by default?
So anytime you accept a Foundry mission, the first time you click on it, you'll get a pop-up, and that is the grant mission dialogue. That tells you where to go for the mission briefing, and that will be on every mission. So that's why it's the first and only thing in your story tab if you haven't worked on it yet.
Now, there's an important limitation here, though, is that you can only assign existing cryptic NPCs to be the costume for that initial thing. So that means that you have to select, like, the bartender at your Earth space dock or your bridge officer as a preset costume for this Hail mission dialogue. But you pointed out a very interesting workaround that could be used to make it a little more engaging.
Yeah, if you select your bridge officer that would say in the grant mission dialogue, incoming hail from Starfleet Command, then you could set up right after that, the first step of your mission would be a pop-up dialogue that would pop up immediately after they click the button. And that could be your character you created in the costume tab giving the mission to the player. Really, that's where I get all my information is from the grant mission dialogue. I really do check the list.
A lot of people too, and that's actually why I want to bring up the next tip that you told me about is if you don't include very specific directions on how to find the first step of each mission, it might not be possible for people to find out where they need to be going. Now, map transitions are probably one of the most confusing aspects of the story of the Foundry as a whole because they are not something you can actually create on your own. They're something that gets automatically created under certain circumstances. Can you cover with us a little bit of how to create a map transition?
You need to create an objective first in the next map you're going to. So in your mission, you are at Earth Space Dock.
Right.
And you need to you are going into a science lab to go talk to somebody. Well, first you need to enter into the story tab, the contact you're supposed to be talking to.
Oh, okay.
After you do that, in between the grant mission dialogue and that step would come up a new tab that would say map transition. And this is how the player would transition from Earth Space Dock to your research lab. If you don't have the object already hooked up, it won't insert the map transition because it won't know you're going to a different map.
Now, that transition comes up automatically, but it still does include many options that you can tweak and change after it's been created. Another very recent addition to the Foundry is the option of using branching dialogues.
So to start out, you'll need to add a pop-up dialogue to your story tab. Now, after that's added, there will be a button at the bottom that will say Advanced Dialogue Editor, and you'll click on that, and it will take you into a new tab, the Dialogue tab. So where that bottom button used to be, it will say instead now in the Advanced Dialogue Editor, button number 1. And you can type in whatever you want that button to say. But you can also add other buttons in by clicking the plus sign on the right side.
And that adds you can add however many buttons you like?
Yeah, I added in like 8 for one of my puzzles.
Nice. And you showed me you can actually create loops in this. So you have many different dialogue options go to a single answer just by clicking and dragging that arrow that's linked right underneath a button option. Once you exit this advanced dialogue editor, you can see in your story tab that the entire branching dialogue is contained within a single dialogue event. But that's something really important to keep in mind is that you cannot have branching objectives. So these branching dialogue options need to be entirely self-contained, either whether it's a puzzle that you have to pass in order to advance on the mission, or whether it's an informational chunk of text that an NPC is trying to tell you about. From that point, it always has to advance down the same linear path of objectives. All right, so hopefully up to this point, you guys have been following along. We've got environments built, we've got stories written, we've got everything in place to start really making the story happen. But the last important thing is we need to still talk about the difference between contacts and groups. Why would you use a contact and why would you use a group on your map?
NPC contacts are very easy to set up. And there's actually a tab in the story tab to place talk to NPC contact objective.
If combat happens nearby, these contacts, if you use a contact for this, won't involve themselves in that combat.
Yeah, so that's a nice way. If you don't want this contact dies and he wasn't supposed to die, and then people are like, well, where'd he go? So that's one positive thing of using NPC contacts.
As of very recently, the feature was added where you can add idle animations to contacts. However, it's always been available on groups. So you may see some older Foundry missions that use NPC groups instead of contacts because of that animation availability.
So if you go under NPC groups, there are several listed that are just placing a group of a single person. You could take an NPC group like a Targ and just reskin them. So you
apply
take
a costume to it.
Mm-hmm. Oh, you take the Targ and apply a costume of, say, a scientist, and then you can give that an animation of typing on a pad or scanning with his tricorder, and then you have a guy with animations.
Can you still assign a group as a contact?
No, you cannot, but there are several workarounds for this. If you use, under the Story tab, the reach marker, once they get in a certain distance of that group, it will proceed to the next mission objective, which could be that pop-up dialogue.
Which you could assign that dialogue to the same costume that you put that group. So it looks as though they're talking to you as soon as you approach them.
Now, if you need to, say, interact with them, like scan some patient who has a broken leg, you could place an object, a small object, underneath the world, and then they would be actually scanning that object and not the NPC contact or group. You adjust the Y coordinate to a negative degree, and then you can just interact with that, and they won't see it, and they'll think they're interacting with the NPC that has a broken leg or something.
Now, I wanted to touch back on contacts real quick because one of the specific benefits to using them as well is that they are the only object you can place in the Foundry that has the bouncing eye quest indicator over their head. Okay, so at this point, I know that these tips and tricks that Murphy and I have offered are very much just scratching the very topmost layer of everything that's available in the Foundry. There are additional workarounds, there are additional tips, there are tons of tricks that you can do all the time, but I just want to help you guys not be overwhelmed. So here's what I want you to do. Everybody that's watching this, go play with the Foundry. If you haven't already, don't be afraid. Hop right in, and if you have any questions in game, Murphy is actually willing to offer his help if you see him in game, right? Go ahead and give out your @name, and they'll bug you incessantly.
My @name is @AdmiralMurphy, and you can send me as many PMs as you want.
And one more quick tip, we have a few links in our show notes to Starbase UGC, as well as StarTrekOnline.com has also put together a whole bunch of just a consolidated list of video links to tutorials.
That's where I learned how to use the Foundry.
And he's an expert, people. All right, Murphy, well, thanks for joining me.
J-Man, that brings us to the end of this week's episode.
An epic Foundry episode.
Dude, no kidding. You know what? On that note, before we go, we wanted to leave you with a couple of Foundry missions you could walk away from this episode and play.
Yeah.
The J-Man and I sat down on the live stream before we went, and we played a few Foundry missions, and we thought we'd lay them on your face.
Yeah.
What do you got, J-Man?
The first one I want to mention is by Havraha, who you guys might know is one of the primary guys over at StarbaseUGC.org, which, by the way, if you watched our tutorial just recently, head over to Starbase UGC if you need further tips.
Yeah.
That's the place to go.
Yeah.
But anyway, his mission called To Helna and Back is a really great mission. It starts on Risa, so you got some of that social atmosphere going on.
I always love giving Rice a little more love.
One of the best things about this mission, I think, is that it starts off as kind of a mystery that you're working on solving, and it gets you really involved with the story before the combat starts. So you actually feel like there's a reason to be punching these guys' faces in,
okay.
You know?
Yep.
Great script overall, but
Gives you motivation.
It's a lot of reading. So if you're not really all into the dialogue, you might skip this one, but it's a really good script, so it's worth it if you like reading.
Okay. It's got a good Trek feel to it?
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah.
Did you want me to talk about mine, or do you want to list the other one you played?
Yeah, go ahead and tell us yours, because it's unique. It's a KDF.
It's a KDF mission, and it's called Prison Break. And I played in a group of 5. And when you go into the first section of this game, it's a space combat mission, the first act of this episode. And when you go in there, it's a pretty epic battle. In fact, the author, it's so epic, the author even gives you a bunch of ally NPCs to help you with the battle. I feel, have some scaling issues when I was group of 5. It was pretty major. I mean, it took probably a group of 5 of us 20, 30 minutes to get through it.
At least. Yeah. It was probably 10 to 15 minutes just for the first group of 3.
Yeah, because you got to beat 3 groups of them. So be prepared for some epic space combat, but if you're okay with that, that's...
I ran this mission yesterday solo, and it scaled much better.
Yeah.
So I would probably recommend doing this one solo for other people in the future.
But if you want to, you can eventually get through it. Once you get past the space combat, and I don't usually say this because I always enjoy space combat, but once you get past the space combat, what's really a lot of fun in this one is the ground scene. He's got a good ground mission where it's compared to the space combat, it felt like it moved at a pretty good clip.
Yeah.
And then there's some nice customized destruction that happens in this ground combat. Whenever somebody in the Foundry gets creative with destroying the ship, ripping the hull apart, damaging
having
the bridge,
pieces like fall over. In fact, the background that we have right now with the half collapsed bridge over there, that's from this mission. Yep. Yeah. It looks really good.
Yeah. So I had a lot of fun. So check that out. It's Prison Break and it's on the KDF side.
KDF only.
Yeah, it is KDF.
Now, a couple others that neither of us actually got to play through, but I've been getting nothing but rave reviews on these. One of which is Dead in Space, which the reason that I haven't gotten to play this is because it's recommended for a minimum team of 5.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
So apparently the final epic battle of this is indeed epic, and you want to be fully armed and operational before you head into that. So, but nothing but great reviews for that Dead in Space. And the last one is actually, the reason I haven't played this is because it's written in German. But again, I've heard nothing but good things about this. We actually had the mission sent to us, landed in our Stoked at Jupiter Broadcasting email from the original author.
Oh, cool.
He wanted to tell me about it because it was too big the script is too involved for him to accurately translate it because English is not his primary language. But we have a few folks in our audience that speak German.
Yeah.
They went and tried it out. So the name of that mission is Wolfsjagd, which translates to wolf hunt.
Wolfsjagd?
Wolfsjagd, WOLF. Oh, it's in the lower third, whatever. It's German.
Yeah, it's German. And we actually have quite a few German viewers, so we thought we'd give that a mention.
Yeah.
And maybe even if you're interested in helping translate, you might be able to contact the author.
Oh, yeah.
That'd be pretty cool, wouldn't it?
It would be.
Boy, oh boy. All right, everyone. Well, thanks so much for tuning into this week's episode of Stoked. And thanks to FreshBooks.com for sponsoring us. And we'll see you right back here next Tuesday.